Good evening. Thanks for joining the public meeting for the Tijuana Estuary Tidal Restoration Program 2 Phase I. The meeting will begin shortly. We're going to wait a few minutes here to allow some additional time for some others to join. Thanks for your patience, and the meeting will begin shortly. Good evening. Thanks for joining the meeting tonight. The meeting will begin shortly. We're going to give another couple minutes to allow some more people to join. It's 1 minute after the hour. I anticipate we will begin at 5 after the hour. Thanks for your patience and thanks for joining. Good evening. Meeting will begin shortly. We are giving it a few extra minutes to allow for some additional participants to join. Thanks for your patience. Thanks for joining. Meeting will begin shortly. We're going to give it 2 more minutes and a little more time for some additional people to join, and then we will kick off the meeting. Thanks for your patience. We will begin shortly. Good evening and welcome to the public meeting for the Tijuana Estuary Tidal Restoration Program 2, Phase I, Draft Environmental Impact Report, Environmental Impact Statement. My name is Chris Peregrine, manager at the Tijuana River National Estuarine Research Reserve. On behalf of the project partners and team members, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this meeting. I will be providing the formal presentation this evening, and we will be joined by some project partners and team members, which I will introduce shortly. We're using the Zoom application for this meeting. Please note closed captioning in English is available by clicking the CC icon in your Zoom window. When you click the CC icon, select Show Subtitle. Also, please use the chat feature if you need assistance or wish to ask a question. We have team members managing the chat and they will assist you if needed. Although we encourage you to use the chat feature to ask questions, note that we will not respond to those questions until the end of the presentation. However, if you're having an issue and you want some guidance in how to manage the Zoom application, you can put that question into chat and our team members will do their best to help you out. Also notice in the Zoom toolbar, you can change the view of your screen. So if you have a particular view on your monitor now, where the presentation box might be covering up a portion of the presentation, the actual presentation, look for the view indicator in the toolbar. Click that and it will give you several options to change the view that you're seeing the presentation in. A little bit of housekeeping. Questions will be taken following the formal presentation. Participants will be on mute. Please remain on mute throughout the formal presentation. You will have an opportunity to take yourself off mute during the question period after the formal presentation. This presentation is being recorded and it will be posted on our website. The website's listed here on the slide. It's turner.org website. You'll also see this website and all email addresses and US postage addresses will all be placed in the chat as well. So if you wanted to copy those addresses for easier use in the future. If you're accessing the turner.org website, on the home page, up at the top, you'll see a button for About. Click the About button, and then that'll provide a drop down. And in that drop down, you will see public notices. And that's the location where you will find the majority of the information that we are sharing today. We will not be taking formal comments during this meeting. Your comments must be submitted in writing if you want them to be included in the formal record and responded to as part of the formal record. The process for submitting comments will be described at the end of the formal presentation. This meeting is scheduled from 6 to 8. We plan to spend about 1 hour, maybe a little bit less, on the formal presentation, which will include meeting objectives, project history, purposes, and objectives, restoration alternatives and associated impacts overview, environmental review process, including where to review the draft EIR, EIS, and how to provide your comments, and next steps in the EIR, EIS process. We will address any questions with the remaining time. So we anticipate about an hour, maybe a little bit more, dedicated to any questions you might have. CEQA and NEPA lead agencies. The lead agency for the California Environmental Quality Act for this project is the California Department of Parks and Recreation. The lead agency for the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, for this project is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Tijuana Slough National Wildlife Refuge. The effort also includes a NEPA cooperating agency, which is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Some introductions. TETRP II Phase I project partners include the Tijuana River National Estuarine Research Reserve, the Southwest Wetlands Interpretive Association, the California Wildlife Conservation Board, and the California State Coastal Conservancy. Additional project team members include Nordby Biological Consulting, Anchor QEA, and AECOM. As stated earlier, some team members and project partners are joining us today and will be available during the question portion of the meeting, or they are helping support and run the virtual meeting. These members include Vicki Touchstone and Brian Collins from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Chris Peregrine, which is myself, Lorena Warner-Lara, and Maria Ahmad from California State Parks, Maida Winter and Jeff Crooks from the Southwest Wetlands Interpretive Association, or SWIA, Chris Nordby from Nordby Biological Consulting, and Cindy Kincaid from AECOM. Main objectives of today's meeting. The main objective of today's meeting is to increase your understanding of the TETRP II Phase I restoration alternatives in the CEQA-NEPA process by describing the restoration alternatives, summarizing the analysis and conclusions in the draft EIR-EIS, explaining the public review process and how to provide your comments, and providing an overview of the next steps in the environmental review process. TETRP II Phase I Introduction. The Tijuana Estuary Tidal Restoration Program 2 Phase I. The significance of the name incorporates the history of the project. The Tijuana Estuary Tidal Restoration Program, or TETRP, was initially envisioned to be a 495-acre restoration project, and it is described in a 1991 EIR-EIS, which is referenced in the cited material for the draft EIR-EIS you now have available to review. With additional study through the years, the 495-acre TETRP project was refined, and it was reduced in size to a 250-acre restoration project, which we now call TETRP II. This project is initially described in the 2008 Tijuana Estuary Friendship Marsh Restoration Feasibility Study. Phase I will be the first phase of the construction of that 250-acre restoration project. And that's how we get the name TETRP II Phase I. TETRP II Phase I is a proposal to restore coastal wetlands in an area south of the Tijuana River main channel and north of Monument Road at the western end of the Tijuana River Valley. You can see in this slide, in the image, the general project area for TETRP II Phase I. It's outlined by this box. Also note the restored model marsh. We'll speak more about that in future slides. You can see a portion of Monument Road here and Monument Mesa here. Most of the project site occurs within Borderfield State Park, managed by the California Department of Parks and Recreation. The northernmost portion of the site occurs within the Tijuana Slough National Wildlife Refuge, managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. In this image, you can see the project area set within the boundaries of Borderfield State Park, as well as the Tijuana Slough National Wildlife Refuge. So looking at this image, you see this blue line is the boundary of the Tijuana Slough National Wildlife Refuge. And this orange or red colored line is the boundary of Borderfield State Park. Restoration within the Tijuana Estuary is needed to revise decades of habitat degradation due to sediment deposition from upstream erosion. Decades of sediment deposition from upstream transborder canyons and the sediment-laden floodwaters of the Tijuana River have filled in portions of the Tijuana Estuary, converting sensitive coastal wetlands to non-native uplands. This environmental degradation is apparent in the image shown here of the old entrance to Borderfield State Park and the surrounding habitat inundated with sediment by a storm event in the early 2000s. The Tijuana Estuary has experienced extensive loss of coastal wetlands since the mid-1800s, including a 50% decrease in subtidal and mudflat habitat and a 42% decrease in salt marsh vegetation. This is the primary motivator for pursuing the implementation of TETRP II Phase I. In this slide, you see an image of a portion of Borderfield State Park. The entrance to Borderfield State Park, as it currently is today, is in this region here. And this is Goat Canyon. And you can see flowing out of Goat Canyon, these large brownish colored plumes. And these are plumes of sediment. So this image depicts a snapshot of some of the sedimentation, excessive sedimentation that's been happening through the years and compromising the sensitive salt marsh habitat of the Tijuana Estuary. TETRP II Phase I builds upon the success of other projects in the Tijuana River Valley, including the restoration of the 20-acre model marsh in 2000 and the construction of the Goat Canyon sediment basins in 2005. You can see these projects here. This is the 20-acre model marsh, and that was completed in 2000. And these are the Goat Canyon sediment basins here. These were constructed in 2005. TETRP II Phase I builds upon the success of these projects. The purpose of the project is to restore a portion of the southern arm of the Tijuana Estuary to intertidal wetlands and associated native uplands, consistent with the Tijuana Estuary Friendship Marsh Restoration Feasibility Study that was completed in 2008. And I referenced that study earlier in this presentation, and you can get the full reference to that study in the citation for the draft EIR EIS, which is now available. The project is needed to address ongoing degradation of coastal resources and its effect on essential habitat for listed species, migratory birds, fish, and other aquatic organisms. The project is needed to improve water and habitat quality by increasing the tidal prism. And the project is needed to maintain continuous tidal exchange in a healthy wetland ecosystem by removing sand from the closed river mouth on an as-needed basis. Goals and objectives of TETRP II Phase I. We are seeking to increase the estuary's tidal prism by restoring 82 to 87 acres of coastal wetland lost or damaged by sedimentation. We want to maintain effective tidal flows and good water quality through improved tidal circulation and an open river mouth. We intend to increase habitat for listed and sensitive coastal species. We want to beneficially reuse excavated material to the extent feasible. And we aim to incorporate research and adaptive management into project design, implementation, and monitoring. Developing a restoration plan. Project design considerations include the following. Restore coastal wetlands while preserving areas of native upland and wetland habitat. Protect and/or enhance native habitats in and around the model marsh. Establish upland areas to protect marsh habitat from future sedimentation. And minimize impacts to visitors and residents. In this image, we're providing our first look at some of the specific design details of the proposed restoration. You can see this area colored in green and outlined by the black dotted line. This is the area that's proposed for restoration. This area is a proposal to enhance the existing tidal channel. This area on the beach in the swash zone is a proposal for beach placement of beneficial reuse of excavated materials. You see a staging area here. And the red dotted line indicates the anticipated or proposed construction vehicular route. We will see this image in various forms throughout the presentation and identify additional features moving forward. Through this project, we propose to restore 82 to 87 acres of coastal wetlands, native uplands, and transitional habitats. The restoration plan includes a focus of restoration areas near existing tidal channels. The project is designed to enhance major tidal channels and increase the tidal prism to improve tidal exchange at the river mouth. You can see that this image on this slide is depicting in a bit more of a zoomed in sense the image that we saw on the last slide. So again, the proposed restoration area is in green, and this is the 20-acre model marsh, which was completed in the year 2000. Proposed staging area, the enhancement of the existing tidal channel, and the proposed area for beach placement. In this restoration plan, we prioritize the use of excavated materials for beneficial reuse. The plan identifies options for beneficial use of appropriate materials, including placement of sand on the barrier beach, restoration of native, transitional, and upland habitat south and east of the restored wetlands to provide protection from storm-generated sediment flows, and use of some material for habitat restoration at the Nelson Sloan Quarry. You can see the areas identified here, the proposed beach placement area, and this area identifies proposal for some material to restore native, transitional, and upland habitat. The restoration plan includes design features to minimize impacts to visitors and residents. These design features include construction limited to 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday, truck routes selected that minimize travel in residential areas, and access to the beach will be maintained on weekends and holidays. The dotted red lines depict the truck routes to be used for hauling excavated materials off-site to the Nelson Sloan Quarry, to landfills, or to other destinations. So you can see the dotted lines accessing various routes off-site, including here the Nelson Sloan Quarry, which is a separate project, but related to this project because the material excavated from TETRP II Phase I could be used to help restore the landform and native habitats of the Nelson Sloan Quarry. Draft EIR EIS analyzes three alternatives: a no project alternative, a proposed project, and another alternative described here as alternative 1. Alternative 1 is a proposal to restore 75.2 acres of intertidal wetlands and 11.6 acres of native, transitional, and upland habitats, while preserving 0.5 acres of additional native transitional habitat. You probably recognize this shape of the proposed restoration project. Now looking a bit closer and getting a bit more detail on the proposed habitats to be restored. Notice in this view of alternative 1, the different colors that can be seen in this slide, and then also in the legend. And note also that those colors correspond to a number. And then each of those corresponds to a different type of habitat. So this is where you can see the different types of habitats and where they're proposed to be restored in alternative 1. Also notice this area enhancing the existing tidal channel. And there are a few other details that we will describe in some following slides, such as connections to tidal channels. This slide offers a closer look at the restoration and preservation details of alternative 1. These habitats and the associated acreages correspond with the previous slide. Alternative 1 includes components to restore 68.4 acres of coastal wetlands, including 18 acres of mudflat habitat, 15.6 acres of low salt marsh habitat, 34.8 acres of middle to high salt marsh habitat. Alternative 1 also includes components to restore 6.8 acres of intertidal channel and 11.6 acres of native transitional and upland habitat. Alternative 1 also includes components to preserve 0.5 acres of existing transitional and native upland habitat, generally to the north of the proposed restoration footprint. So I'm going to go back to the previous slide and noting the detail here of these acreages. You can start to get a sense if you look between these two slides and find this information in the draft EIR EIS. You can see the start to make a connection between the types of habitats, where they are in the proposed project, and the proposed quantity or acreage of each of those habitats. This slide provides some additional detail on the restoration components of alternative 1, including increase of tidal prism by 1.5 million cubic feet, facilitate tidal exchange with one connection to South Beach Slough and one connection to Old River Slough. Those are here. So this is the South Beach Slough, and here's the one connection proposed to connect this restoration area to this tidal channel. And then over here is the Old River Slough. And here's the proposed connection of this section of the restoration to the Old River Slough. Alternative 1 also includes some components such as the excavation of 585,000 cubic yards of material to create the wetlands, use of at least 5,000 cubic yards of that material to create areas of transitional upland habitat south and southeast of the restored wetlands. And you can see that in this portion of the image here. Alternative 1 also includes transport offsite and/or beneficial reuse, such as beach nourishment, of the remaining 580,000 cubic yards. Now that we have reviewed alternative 1, we will look more closely at the proposed project. The proposed project includes components to restore 67.9 acres of intertidal wetlands and 14.6 acres of native transitional and upland habitats, while also preserving 4.6 acres of existing native transitional habitat. In this slide, you can see the proposal for the proposed restoration for the proposed project. And you can start to see some of the differences between the proposed project and alternative 1. But similarly, what you want to look at are the types of habitats that you'll see in the legend in their corresponding number or color, and then finding those numbers or those colors in this image, and then getting a sense of the distribution of proposed habitats. Also note, again, the enhancement of the existing tidal channel. This is the South Beach Slough, and then the Old River Slough. This slide offers a closer look at the restoration and preservation details of the proposed project. The proposed project includes components to restore 62.8 acres of coastal wetlands, including 6.4 acres of mudflat habitat, 22.9 acres of low salt marsh habitat, and 33.5 acres of middle to high salt marsh habitat. The proposed project also includes components to restore 5.1 acres of intertidal channels, 14.6 acres of native transitional and upland habitat. The proposed project also includes components to preserve 3.5 acres of transitional and native upland habitat east of Model Marsh and 1.1 acres in the northern portion of the project site. So skipping back to the previous slide, you can start to get a sense going between these two slides, looking at the proposed acreages of the different habitat types, and then finding them in the legend and then on the map. Additional restoration components of the proposed project include increase of tidal prism by 1.9 million cubic feet, facilitate tidal exchange with 2 connections to the South Beach Slough and 1 connection to the Old River Slough. So you can see those in this image here. Here's the South Beach Slough, and you can see that the proposed project has 2 connections, 2 tidal connections to that tidal channel. And here's the Old River Slough, and you can see 1 connection. This is similar to alternative 1. The proposed project also includes excavation of 521,000 cubic yards of material to create these wetlands, and use of at least 7,000 cubic yards of that to create native upland and transitional habitat along the southern and eastern project boundary. You can see that proposed habitat creation in this area of the image here. The proposed project also includes transport offsite and or beneficial reuse, such as beach nourishment or restoration of the Nelson Sloan Quarry of the remaining 514,000 cubic yards. We've reviewed alternative 1 and the proposed project individually, and now we would like to compare and contrast these 2 alternatives. There are outcomes common to both alternatives, including restored coastal wetlands supported by a network of intertidal channels connected to the South Beach Slough and the Old River Slough, increased wetland and upland habitat values within the project site, increased habitat values within the adjacent Model Marsh, improved upland and beach habitat values through reuse of excavated material to the extent practicable, intertidal or increased tidal exchange and stability of the river mouth, and continued access to the beach, continued public access to the beach. This slide provides a comparison of the habitat types and the acreages that we looked at individually in the previous slides. Alternative 1 is proposing to restore 86.8 acres, while the proposed project proposes to restore 82.5 acres. And of that, you can see some differences between these 2 projects and the types of habitats that they're proposing to restore. Alternative 1 is proposing to restore 18 acres of mudflat, while the proposed project is proposing to restore 6.4 acres of mudflat. Alternative 1 is proposing to restore 15.6 acres of low salt marsh, while the proposed project is proposing to restore 22.9 acres of low salt marsh. Alternative 1 is proposing to restore 34.8 acres of middle and high salt marsh, while the proposed project is proposing to restore 33.5 acres of middle and high salt marsh. Alternative 1 proposes 6.8 acres of intertidal channel, while the proposed project proposes 5.1 acres of intertidal channel. And alternative 1 proposes 9 acres of transitional habitat, while the proposed project proposes 11.8 acres of transitional habitat. And finally, alternative 1 proposes 2.6 acres of upland habitat, while the proposed project is looking at 2.8 acres of upland habitat. So now that we have spent some time reviewing the details of the proposed alternatives, we would like to provide an overview of the environmental review process. Although the process differs slightly between the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, and the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, the following actions related to a draft EIR/EIS are required under both CEQA and NEPA. And those actions are to inform the public and decision makers about the project and potential environmental impacts, to provide an opportunity for the public and agencies to comment on the environmental issues associated with project implementation, to identify feasible ways to avoid or reduce environmental impacts, to consider alternatives that reduce or avoid impacts, and to disclose any significant impacts to the environment. A draft EIR/EIS includes the following sections: the introduction, project overview, alternatives, affected environment and environmental consequences, cumulative impact analysis, comparison of alternatives, other CEQA and NEPA considerations, agencies and individuals consulted, a list of preparers, and references cited. Central to the draft EIR/EIS is the environmental analysis. You find much of this in the affected environment or environmental consequences sections. Topics addressed under affected environment and environmental consequences include land use, recreation and public access, hydrology and water quality, coastal processes, hazardous materials and public safety, biological resources, geology, soils, cultural resources, tribal cultural resources, paleontological resources, visual resources, transportation, air quality, greenhouse gas emissions, noise, socioeconomics and environmental justice, public services and utilities, and energy. This slide provides an overview of the CEQA process for an EIR, or an Environmental Impact Report. The California Environmental Quality Act EIR process includes the following steps: a notice of preparation, or NOP, of a draft EIR. This is a notification that an EIR will be prepared, as well as solicitation for early comments and a scoping meeting. Preparation of a draft EIR. This takes into consideration public scoping meeting comments. And this is the document that you now have available for your review. We have a public review of the draft EIR. The completed draft EIR is issued for agency and public review and comment for a period of 45 days. And this is the public comment period that we are in right now. Certify the EIR. The final document will include responses to comments and findings, statements of overriding considerations as applicable, and a notice of determination. This is a notice filed with the county clerk following project approval, and it describes the project and expected impacts, if any. This slide provides an overview of the NEPA process. The National Environmental Policy Act includes the following steps: a notice of intent to prepare an EIS, And this is published in the Federal Register to solicit comments and initiate the scoping process. A preparation of the draft EIS, and this takes into consideration all scoping comments. And again, this is the document that you now have available to you to review. It also includes a notice of availability of a draft EIS. This is published in the Federal Register, and it indicates the 45-day public comment period. And this is the public comment period that we are currently in for the TETRP II Phase I project. The NEPA process includes response to public comments and the preparation of a final EIS, and the notice of availability of the final EIS. Availability of final EIS is published in the Federal Register. The NEPA process also includes a record of decision, or ROD. This is issued no sooner than 30 days after the notice of availability publication. So the previous few slides provided a general overview of the CEQA and NEPA process. Now we would like to focus more specifically on the CEQA and NEPA analysis and process for the TETRP II Phase I project. This slide provides an overview of impacts and adverse effects identified in this project. For both Alternative 1 and the proposed project, under CEQA, impacts related to water quality, biological resources, and air quality would be significant and unavoidable during project construction. Under NEPA, impacts related to water quality and biological resources would be considered significant effects during project construction. We will take a closer look at these in subsequent slides. Effects to water quality are similar under both alternatives. Placing excavated material on the beach or swash zone could release pollutants at levels that exceed federal or state standards, resulting in temporary significant impacts under CEQA and NEPA. Although we have noted a potential for temporary significant impacts to water quality with the beach placement element, note that additional analysis for water quality shows no change or degradation in wet weather water quality, no change in storm flows or pollutant input, and no substantial increase in listed indicators despite the Tijuana Estuary's current listing as a state imperative water body. Impacts related to biological resources. Effects to breeding birds are similar under both alternatives. Noise generated by construction and truck traffic within the project site and along Monument Road would significantly impact federally and state-listed special status bird species, migratory birds, and non-special status species if construction continues into the breeding season. Such impacts, if not mitigated, would be significant under CEQA and NEPA. Impacts could be avoided or minimized by restricting construction activities to outside the breeding season and installing temporary noise walls where breeding birds could be present. Impacts related to air quality. Under CEQA, both alternatives could have potentially significant impacts to regional air quality related to particulate matter generated during construction, with a potential for exceedance of daily thresholds for PM 2.5 emissions and daily annual thresholds for PM 10 emissions. Neither alternative would conflict with the county's regional air quality strategy, nor expose sensitive receptors to substantial concentrations of construction-related emissions. Under NEPA, no significant direct or indirect effects to air quality would occur, as emissions would not exceed established annual de minimis levels. Less than significant impacts with mitigation. Mitigation measures have been incorporated into the scope of both alternatives to avoid potentially significant impacts under NEPA and/or CEQA. These mitigation measures pertain to the following sections: cultural resources, tribal cultural resources, hazardous materials, public safety. Regarding recreation and public access, in both alternatives, the 0.5 mile marsh trail, which is a pedestrian-only trail, would be removed to accommodate wetland restoration. Eliminating the marsh trail is not considered significant under CEQA or NEPA, as the existing North Beach Trail will continue to provide a similar trail experience, including a connection to the beach via the South Beach Trail. In this image, you can see circled here the marsh trail, which is proposed to be removed to accommodate wetland restoration. But you can also see the North Beach Trail, which comes in adjacent to that area, and the South Beach Trail, which both provide access through this region of the Tijuana River Valley and out to the beach. Reviewing the draft EIR EIS. You can review the draft EIR EIS online at the website shown in this slide, which is the turner.org website. Once you get to the homepage, click About on the top of the homepage, and you'll see a drop-down which will include public notices. Click on Public Notices and scroll down to the section entitled Tijuana Estuary Tidal Restoration Program 2, Phase I. Remember that the websites, emails, and addresses listed in this presentation will also be included in the chat. Hard copies of the draft EIR EIS are available for review at the following locations: the Tijuana Estuary Visitor Center in Imperial Beach, the San Ysidro Branch Library, the Imperial Beach Library, State Park Southern Service Center office, which is in Liberty Station in San Diego, the State Park San Diego Coast District office, which is in Old Town San Diego State Historic Park. Addresses, phone numbers, and office hours are available at the website listed here. This is the turner.org website in the same location we've been referencing for other materials in this presentation. Remember to check hours for these locations, hours of business for these locations before you go. Also note that the hard copies available at these locations are not available for takeaway, but are available to review while you are there on site. Submitting your written comments for the draft EIR EIS. You must submit your written comments no later than October 3rd, 2022. A reminder that only written comments will be accepted as part of the formal record. You may use any of the following methods to submit your written comments. You may submit by US mail to the address listed here, which is Brian Collins at U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service at the San Diego National Wildlife Refuge Complex, 1080 Gunpowder Point Drive in Chula Vista, California, 91910. And this address will be listed in the chat. You may also submit your written comments via email to the email address listed here, fw8plancomments@fws.gov. If you submit email comments, be sure to include in the subject line of your email TETRP DEIS/EIR, so we can be sure to find and organize all of these comments effectively. In-person comments may be dropped off at the Tijuana Estuary Visitor Center, 301 Caspian Way in Imperial Beach. CEQA NEPA timeline. Excuse me. This slide provides a timeline of the CEQA NEPA process for TETRP II Phase I. The notice of intent, notice of preparation was posted in April of 2021. A virtual scoping meetings were held in June of 2021. Notice of availability, notice of completion of a draft EIR EIS was posted on August 19th, 2022. And a 45-day comment period for the draft EIR EIS runs from August 19th, 2022 through October 3rd, 2022. And this is the public review period that we are currently in right now. A notice of availability of the final EIS for NEPA is anticipated in January 2023. And the Deputy Director of Park Operations Review and Action, or the certification of the EIR for the CEQA process, is anticipated in January of 2023. Additionally, the record of decision for NEPA and the notice of determination for CEQA is anticipated in February 2023. Next steps for this project include preparation of final designs and permitting and securing funding for the implementation. That concludes our formal presentation. We have about an hour and 10 minutes now for a question portion of this meeting. A couple points to make for the question portion of the meeting. Each participant will be provided 2 minutes for asking questions. Once everyone has had an opportunity to ask their questions, if time remains, you may ask additional questions. Comments on the adequacy or accuracy of the draft EIR EIS must be provided in writing to become part of the formal record. Comments and questions from the public made at this meeting will not become part of the formal record. And responses from team members made at this meeting will also not become part of the formal record. In order to ask questions, you may either type them into the chat or raise your hand using the raise hand feature. This slide shows an image of where you might find the raise hand feature in your Zoom toolbar. If you're having any trouble finding the raise hand feature, please put your comment in chat and one of the team members can help direct you further. A couple things to note. Right now, everyone is on mute. When you're called on to provide your question, you can take yourself off mute, and you can do that in the Zoom toolbar by clicking the image of the microphone with the line through it, toggling back and forth on that. And but then please make sure to put yourself back on mute once you are done providing your question and interacting with the team members. If you're on a phone and you want to take yourself off mute, you use the process *6. The team members will help guide us through the question and answer period. I believe we will start with questions that were put in the chat previously, and then we will go to raised hands and do our best to take all these questions in order that we receive them. And with that, I'm going to hand this over to Lorena Warner-Lara to moderate the question and answer session. Lorena?
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, so again, as Chris mentioned, if anyone has a question they would like to ask, go ahead and raise your hand and I will call on you to unmute. Or alternatively, you can type your question into the chat as well. Also, if anyone wants us to go back to a previous slide, that's also an option. So no. Again, to ask a question, you can raise your hand in the reactions or place it in the chat. Since we do have this meeting scheduled to go until 8 o'clock, we will be available until then for any questions.
So it looks like we don't have any questions. I don't want to hinder anybody from asking questions, but I think given that we haven't heard from anybody yet, unless anyone has any objections, I have 2 additional slides to go through that involve some content on how to comment on the draft DEIR EIS and a quick wrap up. I think I'll run through those slides and then we can continue to keep the meeting open for questions. So a reminder that comments are due October 3rd, 2022. If you need any more information on this project, you can visit these websites. We have 2 here, the turner.org website and also Fish and Wildlife Service website. Both of those are on the screen here and will be placed into the chat. In order to provide comment that you want to be part of the formal record, you must provide that comment in writing, and you have options to provide those comments by U.S. mail to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in their San Diego National Wildlife Refuge complex address in Chula Vista, or you can provide the written comment via email at the email address that's provided on the slide here, which is fwa.plancomments@fws.gov. And remember to include in the subject line TETRP DEIR EIS. And you may also provide your written comments by dropping them off in person at the Tijuana Estuary Visitor Center. And if you're going to any of the locations in person, just remember to call ahead and see what the hours of business are for that location. For example, the Tijuana Estuary Visitor Center is open Wednesday through Sunday. And thank you for participating. For more information, you may go to the turner.org website. And you also may contact Brian Collins, the Refuge Manager, by email at brian_collins@fws.gov or by telephone at 760-431-9440, extension 273. Additional project information is also available at the Fish and Wildlife website that's listed here and in the chat. Thank you for joining us. That concludes our meeting. We will be here for 1 more hour as we committed to, in case anybody shows up late, and we can answer questions throughout that period. Thank you.